Hey, Stephen, guess what? Jesus called and he said, I've been approved with all access to photograph your baby's christening. Isn't that great? Jesus was like, you've been approved. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. I'll be there and I'll take pictures. And thank you for letting me into your house of worship, even though I'm Jewish.
Stephen, am I not the bestest writer of jokes in the history of joke writing on this podcast?
The bestest of the best.
On this podcast.
On this podcast.
I
And
really
in the
think,
world.
Well, I mean, Jesus did call.
He did.
And he said, take the wheel.
Ooh.
Jesus, take the wheel. But no, I was approved, Stephen. I was approved to photograph your baby's baptism.
You were. All access.
All access except for up on the thing where the Jesus water is.
The sanctuary.
What kind of water is it? Have you ever seen what kind of water they put in there?
It's holy, blessed water.
I don't know what the Jews use in mikvahs. Do you know what a mikvah is?
Nope.
That's where people go and convert to Judaism, and it's like this pool, and it looks like a pool, and you got to get naked. That's probably so that the rabbis can look at you naked, or women. They're called rabbis too. And then you walk into it, and then they dunk you just like a baptism, except this is your full body and you're naked. I don't understand it. I don't understand how dipping you in the water all of a sudden makes you a Jew. But hello, you're now a Jew.
It's all about the water being blessed, Jared.
All right. So speaking of blessing water, Stephen was like, Jared, I'd like you to come and photograph my baby's baptism. Is that how it worked?
I mean, kind of. It was very last minute. It's like, can you do it? And you're like, I don't really know the dates yet. I'm like, oh, I'll let you know. Like the day before, I let you know the actual time and everything.
But I was like, what gear do I take to photograph a baptism? Or first, more importantly, will I spontaneously combust if I walk through these doors?
And you did not.
No, because I've been to that church before, so Jesus in that church already knew me from your wedding and one I did way in the past before I knew you.
And just like Dan's wedding, I was not sure if the photographer was actually going to show up because because you had plans that day, and you're like, well, just in case, send me the address. And I didn't hear back from you, so I had no idea if you were coming. I didn't know until about 10 minutes prior to the baptism starting. I look back in the pews, and I'm like, oh, Jared is here. That's good.
That's right. I got there at 1:01. Right before the baptism started.
Yeah, right. You probably showed up like 20 minutes prior.
No. I tried to be early, but my friend, she was leaving, and I wanted to stay and hang out a little longer. And then by the time I left, there was Eagles traffic getting onto I-95. And once I got past the Eagles traffic, it was smooth sailing till I got to the church.
And then all I see is a giant 100 to 300 in your hands. And I'm like, oh my God, what are you doing?
I figure, what is the best lens to bring to a baptism at a church when you know that you can't get up close and personal with the baby, unless I put a fisheye lens above the baptismal pond?
Well, normally you can, though. Now, I've shot probably, 12 baptisms at this point. All of my nieces and nephews, I've shot all of their baptisms. I was always able to go right behind them while they're doing the actual blessing and pouring the holy water on the baby. And for some reason, this time around, he wouldn't allow that. Every church is different. Every priest makes up their own rules.
I know why.
That's not why.
Do you see my nose? Are you seeing this right now?
I asked him before you even showed up. I said, I have a photographer here. What's off limits?
He's Jewish?
I said, by the way,
he's Jewish?
By the way, he's Jewish. And he's like, he shouldn't even be here.
No.
I just let him know a photographer's coming. And he said, the only thing that's off limits is the sanctuary area around the actual holy water, blah, blah, blah. Which is odd because, again, before, I was always front and center right there behind the actual person, holding the baby over, and it was never a problem. So I always brought like a super wide lens for that moment. I usually always brought like a 50-1.2, 85-1.2, 15 to 35, something wide. And usually you're in a very small, tight-knit area. But this time around, I guess your 100 to 300 actually kind of worked out.
Yeah.
And also it worked out because this was not a private ceremony. So there were 3 other families. So 4 total families having baptisms that day. So it was quite a packed area. Normally it's like all front and center. You're only taking up the first 2 pews or so. And we're not that far away from each other.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. And I've never shot a baptism. Not that it's that hard to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get pictures of Stephen holding his baby and his wife holding his baby. And then Steven tells me later that he was holding the baby a specific way so that I could get the photo.
I was holding her a specific way so you could see her because I saw your vantage point where you were shooting from. And then I was trying to fake a smile the entire time because I couldn't tell when you were taking photos.
I thought that was
obviously
real.
It was real. I wasn't going to be smiling the entire time nonstop, but every time I would see you in the corner of my eye, I'd be like, oh, Jared's there. Pretend to look really, really happy.
Oh, shit. It's all fake. Do you hear that,
no,
everybody?
obviously it's real, but again, like if there's a time where I'm looking down and I just have a resting bitch face, I'm going to smile real quick when I see you in the corner of my eye.
My face all the time?
Exactly. But the main thing with the 100 to 300 was normally I would go and take photos of the family after, like right in front of the altar, and I would take like a 51-2, and I'll bring my flash and I'll take a bunch of family photos, and I'm like, there's no way Jared's going to have 100 to 300 and take these family photos, so we had to go outside for that, which is totally fine because the light was much better outside. That's why I questioned when you showed up at the 100 to 300. I'm like, oh, he doesn't have anything shorter probably.
Well, 100's good enough for that. Oh, by the way, guys, we will be getting to the big stories a little later on in here, which is talking about the brand new Sony A7, A9 III, and the 302.8 from them. We're going to go into details, maybe talk about things that others haven't really touched on just yet, because you already know the specs. We'll hit the high-level stuff as usual. But anyway, back to the baptism. Yeah, I thought 100 to 300 with a R3 was the best choice. It's silent. 100 to 300 is perfect.
It looked good, too. And my photographer actually gave me the RAW files, too, which was very nice.
Well, I edited using FroPack 4, and I used the ones that I knew Steven would like, the more muted. What did I use? Which one?
Saltwater taffy, I believe you used.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my style, but it's a totally different situation. And I was like, here's the ones that I will pick, and I edited it because I got it done real quick. And then I'm like, here's the RAW files. You can have all the RAW files.
You turned them around in what, like 2 or 3 hours? I remember looking at my phone and being like, wow, I already have a link.
Well, when I got home, I edited them, but that was after I left your house. We got to talk about Steven's house, man. Man, presets deserve all the credit in the world for that backyard. Holy backyard.
Hey, it took me a ton of work and a lot of manual labor to get that backyard the way it is.
I know. He called Paco, and Paco came over and was like, yeah, I'll do it.
The other Jesus came too.
Oh.
Jesus.
I got you. No, the backyard is really good. He's got his, what is that? A shed? Now, you did have them move the shed because the lines weren't right. Is that correct?
What? No.
When you first had them put the shed down, the Amish, they didn't put it right, and you're like, you need to move it again?
No, I'm not Jared Polin. I actually was not home when they delivered the shed. My father-in-law told them where to put it. I mean, we already had the pad ready for them, so they just had to go to the pad and then center it.
Well, thankfully, it's on a nice, proper angle. I went and measured it. But no, the grass was thick and luscious. It was gorgeous.
I just overseeded.
I don't even know what any of that means, but it's thick and luscious. And really nice backyard. It was really nice.
Keep in mind, when I moved in, this house was just built. It was on an abandoned lot, so they kept all of the trees here. I had to take down maybe 15 or 20 trees, mainly because they were just invasive, giant, old trees falling apart. I hate cutting down trees personally, but I had to at that point. And I kept 2 of them that were still in decent shape, one of the birch trees, and I think the other one's a maple. But yeah, the backyard took a lot of work and a lot of seasons to get it the way it is. And then I got a stamped concrete patio, a pergola, fire pit, all of that kind of stuff. But that was 3 or 4 years in the making. So it's finally
presets.
It's finally where I want it to be, and it's really nice to enjoy watching something like the MLB game, the playoffs in the backyard during that time of the year.
All right, let's move on. I'm getting ready for Africa. There's lots I got to do. One of those things was buy pants and shirts and socks and all that bullshit. So I went to REI with my friend. She went with me, which was very helpful because she's like really good at wrangling all the stuff. And there's so many choices. And she's like, you should try this and look at this. And I'm like, I don't like that. But she's like, try it anyway. And I was like, no, you try it.
What makes my butt look good and juicy?
That is correct. If you followed my Instagram, you might have seen my butt and maybe my frontal tight in these pants. But I tried on some of the pants. REI, I thought, I was like super excited. Never been to an REI before. Seriously, never been in one. And I thought it was really cool. I was really excited. The first guy that helped us, he was really good. And then the next person that helped us, she just tried to push their membership. Are you a member of REI yet? You get $30 back, and then you get a discount, and then you get this. I'm like, woman, like, Stop trying to sell me on your fucking program. I don't want to hear about it. I'm here to buy pants that make my ass look good.
You don't want to be part of the Recreational Equipment Incorporated, Jared?
Oh, did you just Google that, Steven?
No, I knew that.
No, I mean, it's a really nice store and they have a lot of great options and they had a lot of helpful people, but it was just freaking annoying that every time you talk to someone, you would ask a question, they'd give you an answer and say, oh, by the way, are you a member? And I've worked in retail before, and I'm sure they get some sort of spiff and some sort of bonus if
Guaranteed.
they sign up the most people. And it's like, it's $30 to do it, and they give you a $30 gift card. So you kind of get your money back, but then you go spend more money. But it's just like, can you please shut the hell up? Can you please just let me shop and just answer my questions without bombarding me with, oh, and then of course, when you get to the counter, it's like, would you like to donate a certain amount of money to this program? Would you like to do this? The guy didn't even ask me. He must have saw me from a distance and was like, I'm not asking that guy if he wants to donate to the Starving Children of Africa Fund.
He's definitely going to say no.
No, I already pre-planned it. I told my friend, I'm like, I'm not saying yes to anything. She's like, I'm not saying yes. What did she do? She said yes. She's like, well, I just felt pain. I'm like, yeah, that's what they try to get you to do.
Cue Sarah McLachlan music in the background. Sir, would you like to donate to the Starving Children of Africa?
Steven, they open up a curtain. They open up a curtain behind the checkout counter, and there is a little puppy in there that looks sad at you, and then they come out and they start beating it. And they're like, if you don't give us money, we will beat that puppy. We will continue to beat that puppy. But I was like, no, I will not do that. Unfortunately, so I bought these pants. They only have even sizes in stock. 30-30, 32-30, no 31, no 33. I just ordered 2 new pairs of 33s on the internet because the 32s were kind of tight. But my ass did look good. And I just wanted something that's not going to be my jeans. So I got the 32-30s. I ordered the 32. I wore the 32-30s when I was there. And then I just ordered 2 pairs of 33-30s, and I'll see which ones fit the best, and I'll return the others.
Trying on pants is the worst because they're all different. Every store is different. It's a 32, yet a 32 here might be a 34 in another store. It's just ridiculous. There's no standard.
That's why my friend almost got into a fight with the woman that was there.
Oh.
Well, yeah, because I'm trying on different colors. She's like, try on this color, try on this color. And so, all right, so I'm trying on these colors. They're all the same brand. They're all 32-30s. And I try on one of them. I'm like, yeah, this fits nice. It feels nice. It's nice, snug. It's good. And then I try on another 32-30, this time in like burnt sienna. And I can't even
that's a good
button
preset
it.
from Throwback 2.
Oh, yeah. I can't even button them. And the woman out there was like, my friend was like, these don't fit the same, and it's the same size. She's like, are you tightening the belt that's built in? And she's just like, what do you think, I'm a fucking moron?
Yeah.
Like, so I couldn't get it around my thighs. Like, it was so tight. It was either mismatched or just made smaller. That woman sucked. She handed us, even though the first guy was helping us, I think his name was Michael. He was helping us, and they have a employee number. So he's like, if you go and you get the membership, here's the employee number. He didn't even offer it to us because he was just being helpful. This woman, with knowing that she wasn't the person that started helping us, gave us a card. She's like, use this when you check out. So I went over to Michael. I'm like, hey, cross out her number and put your number on here because she was mean.
Yeah.
He did. He's like, it doesn't really matter. But he was super helpful. I like having personal shoppers because do you know who I am? Do you know who I am?
Do the pants have I Shoot Raw embroidered on the side?
No, they don't. And they also had no shirts there that would have looked fine on me. So I go to the website today. My friend created a whole list of an email for me for things for me to check. Some stuff I liked, some stuff I didn't like. I was like, I found the shirt that I liked on REI, and it has like the repellent built in, the bug repellent. So I go ahead and I add it to my cart, and I go to checkout. It says it's in stock. I go to checkout. It's like, we've removed something that's not in stock. The shirts that I wanted. Unbelievable. So I had to buy socks, all these things I don't know. I probably have to buy underwears. Man, yeah, I do need to order those.
And it's got to be frustrating for you because you never, ever go clothes shopping. You just make your own I Shoot Raw t-shirts.
I just make my own stuff because it's so much easier to do. It's just so much easier to make my own stuff. And the woman was like, you should get different color pairs. And I'm like, no, I want the same color.
Do you have purple in stock?
They didn't. No, I'm going to Africa, Steven. Africa. You're supposed to wear like not bright stuff or something.
All right, so you're supposed to not wear bright stuff at a lot of things, and you still wear purple all the time.
I do.
Black tie affair? Oh, purple.
No, what are you going to tell me? I can't come into your wedding if I'm not wearing a black tie attire? When was the last time they turned someone away from a wedding because they didn't have on, they wore something that wasn't approved?
Oh, I guarantee those weddings, you're being turned away for sure.
The super high end ones?
Yeah.
Nah.
Yeah, they don't care. They're turning people away. They're very particular. If you're doing black tie, yeah.
So anyway, this woman was like, she couldn't understand, why do I want the same of everything? And I'm like, so I don't have to make a decision in the morning. It's that simple. When I'm in Africa, I don't get, what am I showing off? Who am I showing off for? The other guys that are going to be on the trip with me? The elephants? No, I'm not showing off for anybody. I mean, except for the internet, because I got to look good on the internet. But anyway, I just ordered some more. There's some more things I need to get before I go away, and then that's it. So, and then with the announcements in New York, it makes me question, what am I supposed to take to Africa now? But we'll get to that in just a minute. So, moving on. Now we get up to the point which is going to take up the entire episode here because there's so much to talk about.
A lot to unpack.
Sony invited us up to a trip to New York City for their creative space announcement. We already knew that a 300 2.8 was coming. Everybody knew that, but we also had it a few weeks ago. We did film a review. Is it done? Did Dan finish it?
It is done. It could be out this weekend if you wanted it to be.
Well, it all depends on photo news, which I might put out tomorrow. I'll figure out.
Beginning of next week, it should be out. It's ready to go.
So I don't think we're in a rush. We didn't try to put that up like the other people put that one up because anyway, I was away, and by the time I got back and the time it got edited, it wasn't done.
And thankfully, we now have the store set back up and running, so it looks like it used to look. It looks really nice.
Yeah, it's good. So Sony invites us to a trip, and they do something differently than they normally done before. They told us nothing. They told nobody anything.
Well, and this is the first time, I think, since pre-pandemic that we've actually had a Sony trip, right? I mean, we've been so spoiled with them sending us the lenses and being briefed a month beforehand before the public announcement.
Or bodies, yeah, lenses, bodies, whatever it may be. Now, this is the first time, I think, ever that we had no idea what we were going up for. I mean, we had obviously an inkling of what was happening and what the rumors were, but we still didn't know for sure. I think there might have been one in the past where we sat there and waited and we didn't know what was getting announced.
The A7 III, I believe, was the only time before where it was the same thing. They did a presentation in Vegas and we found out when the world found out, and that was another like, whoa.
The good news was it was up in New York City, which means it's only an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and a half away, whether you take a train or you drive in. So that makes it much easier. We don't have to come in as early and have a travel day, and we don't have to have a travel day on the back end of it. So it's just much easier. Speaking of easier, how did you sleep? Because it was probably your first night away from home without a baby.
I actually slept like shit, to be honest, just because I did not know what was happening the next day. I knew I would be having to put out a video that day. Who knows if it was going to be multiple products. We knew about the 300 millimeter, but not so much the A9 III. I just kept tossing and turning all night. I didn't get to bed until about midnight, and then I had to be up at, I think it was about 5:30, 5:45 to, shower, pack, get ready for the day. I wanted to download and get everything ready in terms of the project file for the laptop. I think I slept worse than I slept at home when I get up in the middle of the night for the middle of the night feeding.
I slept great, Steven.
I'm sure you did. How was your pillow there, by the way? Because those pillows suck.
Why'd they suck?
Because they're nice and
flat?
fluffy, and then the second you put your head on, it just flattens all the way.
The flatter, the better for me.
Really?
Just like my women.
I think that's the worst. I have a nice gel memory foam pillow, and it's incredible.
Yeah, I just have a knack. I have a thing. I basically sleep on the mattress with my head just barely. Yeah, I'm a stomach sleeper, so I sleep flat on my stomach with my head to the side.
Yeah, Z pillow is what I have, and it's awesome.
Z pillow, really? Is it Nikon?
Z pillow.
Z pillow. That's right. That's right. We actually ended up driving up. We were supposed to take the train, but if you looked on my Instagram, you would have seen that there's a photo of the kid, Ken Griffey Jr.
Yes.
He was up. He was in Philly to shoot the Cowboys-Eagles game on Sunday, and then on Monday he stopped by the studio to hang out for a little bit, and then Steven, myself, Junior, and this guy Michael Collins drove up to New York City to go to the event because Junior was going to go to the event. He was invited by Sony, and he shoots Sony. He also shoots some Canon, but he was interested in going, so we drove up with him. And we rarely talk about knowing Junior.
Yeah.
We've been talking for a couple of years now, and it's always cool to see him on the sideline shooting. And people are like, "Do you know that he's a photographer?" And I'm like,
No.
Do you know that I get phone calls talking about cameras all the time? But we've kept that under wraps for quite a while.
Yeah.
But it was cool to get him here, take a quick portrait in the studio, head up, and he talked to my dad for like 2 hours about baseball, which was pretty nice.
Your dad was basically interviewing him.
Yeah, well, it was good. Junior, like if you ever encounter Junior in public, just go up to him and say, "You only heard of him because of Frono's photo." Be like, "Are you the guy that Frono's photo talks about?" I heard Frono's photo talking about you.
We went to B&H. We had some time to kill before dinner, and we wanted to see who would get recognized first. Now, this time around, Manny was with us on top of that. And, I was saying that you're now in Jared and Manny's world. They're the celebrities here now. If we go into B&H, they're going to be recognized, and you probably won't be. And we're all joking around like, Jared's going to be the number 1, Manny's going to be number 2, Griffey's going to be number 3, whatever. Meanwhile, we go in there nonstop. Everyone's coming up to Junior like, "Hey man, love you, love your work, love the swing, love everything." Jared gets like nobody saying hi to him the entire time.
Not the entire time. Someone finally came up.
I'm in the back just saying like, we got another 2 for Junior, we got 0 for Jared, 1 for Manny, keeping count the entire time. And Junior just keeps looking back like, "Oh yeah, you think you're the celebrity here?" And I will say, I think people want to come up to you. I just think they're intimidated. And ironically, they're not intimidated by freaking Ken Griffey Jr.
I just have that effect on people. What can I tell you?
Yeah.
But it's a lot of fun to hang out with Junior and Manny and you, and it's just like one of the guys.
And while we were there, a random B&H employee just happened to have a baseball to be signed. It's like, where did that come from, dude? You just have like a whole drawer full of like sports, footballs, baseballs.
So yeah, that's that part of it. But let's get into the announcement part. The first thing that they announced was the 302.8 G Master. Now, this is an impressive lens because it is barely noticeable in your hands. Anybody can hold on to it, even if you don't have big muscles like Dan. You can still hold on to it because it is super, super light and you don't need a monopod. But when I took it out to the soccer field to shoot it at the Union game, I still used it on a monopod because why would I hand hold it the whole time when I'm sitting in that same spot basically the entire game?
Even something that light still becomes heavy after a long period of time.
You're constantly lifting and your biceps are going to burn like mine because I'm just so masculine, and it will get tiresome, cumbersome. I have become cumbersome to the world.
I like how you backed up on the mic like you're actually singing.
Do you know who's back? Speaking of singing, you know who's back on tour?
Creed.
Yes. With
Can
legs
you
wide
take
open
me higher
under the number.
My
Take
sacrifice.
me to the left.
I will say, I was always a huge Creed fan back in the day. I never got to see them live. I really do want to see them live this time around.
101, the only
You were blasting them the other day at the
way is
factory. I'm
one.
like, oh yeah, this is a good album.
Thunder! Yeah, no, I was playing the 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Destination.
Is that the Human Clay album? That was my favorite.
I think it's, I don't know, Worst Enemy. I don't remember which
My
one
Own
it is.
Prison was more like the rock album.
They're really good. Like Creed now is solid. And I will say that
their comeback album was terrible though.
Well, Scott Stapp's solo album there's some hits on that.
The first solo album. I wouldn't say anything after that.
Well, he actually looks fantastic right now.
He does. He looks great.
Like he's in great physical and mental shape now. So that's cool. Yeah, this portion of the podcast is brought to you by Live Nation. No, it's not. It's not brought to you by Live Nation. They don't need any help. I probably won't go see Creed because I don't care. Are they playing? They're playing in Hershey, aren't they?
Yeah, no, Atlantic City they're playing here.
Oh, that's even worse. Everything in Atlantic City is worse.
$60 tickets, but $50 in fees.
Yeah, and then parking. I mean, but Atlantic City is just a hellhole if you've been to Atlantic City recently. It is just like a bomb went off and it's the worst place in the world.
Keeps my brother busy.
As a cop, yeah. So anyway, the 302.8 clocks in at $6,000. And is it sharp? Of course it's sharp. It's a beautiful, gorgeous lens. The biggest discussion topic, though, is that lens versus a 100 to 300 2.8 Canon lens, which weighs almost twice as much and costs another $3,500 on top. I did see one of the Sony artisans put out a video where they said that it was a comparison 300 2.8 versus 100 to 300, except for the fact they've never actually used a 100 to 300 Canon. Now, you cannot do a versus video where you make a decision and a choice to say, I will go with this lens over this lens, when you haven't actually used that lens, and the only parameter you're saying is that, well, it's lighter, and lighter therefore means better. I'll take versatility all day with more weight because, like I said, at the soccer match, I'm on a monopod. So either way you slice it, I'm still on a monopod with the 100 to 300.
And speaking of reviewing something that you've never touched, I've always been very big on, unless you've actually tried out and tested a new lens or a body, then we would never do a full-on review. Now, initial previews are totally different when we can't even get our hands on the product.
Yeah. So my thing is, I really think Sony got caught flat-footed on this lens because, no, I mean, it's amazing. Small, light, just the size of it is just insane. So that part they nailed.
Yeah.
And might it be sharper, like, because it's a prime?
Primes generally are always a little sharper than a zoom, for sure.
Probably,
Less
but
elements.
at the end of the day, you're never going to see the difference, especially when you have the versatility. Because where I ran into issues at the soccer match was around the goal when the guy is coming in and there's some action around the net and I want to pull out wider to get the goalie and the guy kicking, or maybe with the penalty kick that there was, I couldn't do it. And when there's a celebration, I couldn't go wider. But with a 100 to 300, I can capture the deep action at 300, and as they come in closer, I can go wider as needed and zoom back out. That versatility is worth the extra money and the extra weight to me. I think that is the right choice. If I was to have to choose a system, 300, 2.8, or a 100 to 300, I'm taking a 100 to 300 all day, every day.
For Sony shooters, there's not really much to choose from minus the 300 GM at this point. I don't think Tamron or Sigma even have anything close to that range unless you're looking at the 150 to 600 or the 200 to 600 from Sony. The 300 Prime is really the only option if you're in the Sony world right now.
Yeah, 300, 400, and you just...
or if you want to go nuts and do a 7200 and a 1.4x converter or something, but you know how we feel about that.
Still the dumbest thing ever. And that takes it to an F4. Regardless, the 300 2.8 is an absolute gorgeous, tremendous feat of engineering. It's a beautiful lens. So we'll leave that part at that. You could always let us know what you think by texting 313-710-9729. You could text us at any time at 313-710-972. The big part of the whole day was the announcement of the A9 III,
Mark III.
Was pretty sure it wasn't going to be called the A9 III because they should have just called it an A3 at this point because it could have held on to that new moniker.
Based on the price point, which we will get to, I think it should have been a new name.
So I'll hit you. Yeah, we're at the event. And they bring in a bunch of creators. Manny was there. Gerald Undone was there, who I've never met before. And I meet Gerald Undone, and I'm like looking up at a tree. I'm like, holy shit, you're a tall motherfucker.
Yeah, he is.
I'm like, and what? You don't look like that on the internet. And I'm like, usually people come up to me, and he's like, yeah, people say that all the time. I'm like, yeah, you know what they say to me? Man, I thought you were bigger.
You look taller on camera.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. Oh, thanks.
It's the opposite for you.
Thank you for telling me that. It doesn't bother me.
I will say though, right away, we knew it was going to be something big because we didn't even know half of the people they invited, and way more people than normal. Had to be 100 plus people, where typically these events are 30, 40, maybe 50. I think the A7 III might have been 50.
They brought out a lot of, I guess,
a lot of new up and coming creators.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Manny kept telling us we should know who this person is and this person. And I'm like, I don't know these people.
A lot of them were Sony centric influencers. So that's why I didn't really know about them, because I kind of follow people that kind of talk about everything. You know what I mean? You have your Nikon people, your Canon people, your Sony people. And this was definitely that Sony line of influencers.
Yeah. Jordan and Chris from Peppa Tickle. You had
Tony and Chelsea.
Tony and Chelsea. You had DP review people there, which is still questionable.
Dale Baskin and Richard Butler. Yep.
Love Dale. Dale's great. Richard's
people,
cool. I actually never get to talk to Richard, but they were there, which is kind of weird. It's kind of awkward. You got DP review. You got Petapixel, and Petapixel sends writers. It's crazy. And then
Jeremy
you got
Gray. Yeah, he was there.
A lot of people. Just a lot of people there.
Dan and Sally Watson.
And
the
family.
list just goes on and on. And family, yeah.
Tons of people. So it's going to be a pretty big event. I mean, Sony likes spending they spend a shit ton of money. They put us in a nice hotel.
Had to be millions of dollars on that event.
For a launch like this, they probably spend $1 million plus. Easy,
yeah.
Just getting people there. I mean, it's cheap for us to get there because we're on a train.
Yep.
Even though they like to pay for a Sella, and that's overpriced.
They only had to pay for our way home. We took the car up with Griffey.
Yeah, we drove up on the way up. So we're sitting there in the main room. We don't know what we're doing. We're trying to decide, are we going to try and make a video as quickly as possible to put out versus waiting? Normally we have a video ready to go because we know what the stuff is. Or if it's a press event, it's usually before an announcement. So we've had chance to go hands-on and make a video that can go live exactly at 9:30 or 10 o'clock when the embargo lifts. In this case, we weren't going to know anything like everybody else until the announcement. Steven and I made the decision that we would listen to the specs. We would then go film a quicker video, which is a preview, old school style, where I hit the top level things before using the camera.
Regurgitate the information back.
Just because I think people want to hear, they don't want to just watch the Sony event, which is like an hour.
It's nice because you can quickly break it down in the preview and we can get it out into the world. And I think people that are familiar watching you understand your lingo and your way of explaining things.
Yeah. And so that we felt was going to be better than waiting till the nighttime or the next day to put something out. We wanted to get people right then and right there. Petapixel did the same thing.
Literally, when I was trying to find a spot to film, Jordan's like, oh, you're doing the same thing, huh? I'm like, yep. I think it was just me and him trying to film right away. I think it was, right after the presentation, before it even ended, me and you were already walking, trying to find a place to film. Like, that's how quick we filmed right after the event.
One of our Sony friends had the camera that he's like, you can go use this,
from him.
Just basically.
Couldn't go outside.
Don't go outside.
Yeah.
But we did it. So, an event like that, we're sitting there. I was filming myself to get my reaction, just in case it looked like some sort of reaction to the announcement. And what happened when they started doing the announcement is my face goes like, fuck. And it's not fuck because it's like cool.
You look disappointed.
It's not disappointment. What happens is my brain starts
going
every which way because I'm like, well, shit, I'm going to Africa in 2 weeks.
You're not thinking about the public reaction to this camera. You're thinking about the selfish reaction to this camera.
Yeah,
and shit, now I got to change everything I'm bringing to Africa.
Maybe. What's this mean for me? Like, does this render my R3 obsolete?
Yeah.
So anyway, let's hit you with the top level. The top level and the biggest thing that they announced is the fact that it has a global shutter sensor. I saw some people.
It's a stacked sensor with a global shutter.
It's hard to say all of that, but yes, it's a stacked sensor with a global shutter. And what people said I saw the video that we put out is like, I've watched all the other YouTubers and no one explained what a global shutter is. So for anybody that hasn't seen that or understood it yet, it's a simple understanding as with a old sensor, say from your Canon R3, which is a stack sensor, or we'll go back to a Sony sensor. Old sensor. We'll go back to the A7 III. It's basically a scanning sensor, top to bottom. So when you take a picture, it's going line by line, but it's fast. It's super fast.
Certain sensors it's really fast, like stacked sensors, which is why you can get minimal rolling shutter. But something like an A7R5 or 4 with a 61 megapixel sensor, it's notoriously very slow. So you have a slow readout, which could affect the image with rolling shutter.
Like a baseball bowing or a football being an egg shape.
This is talking about the electronic shutter too.
Yes, electronic shutter, because everybody's doing away with the actual shutter. But what global shutter means is that every single pixel is firing at the same time.
Yep.
So when you take a picture, you press that shutter button, it is capturing all of the pixels at once, not having to scan up or down, which means every line is going to be straight. You're not going to get any bowing not every line is going to be straight, but you're not going to get a baseball bat bowing or a golf club because it's all being captured instantly.
I noticed the wording too in their presentation was not minimal rolling shutter or minimal distortion. It was zero distortion, which Sony's very big on, like saying different marketing terms, again, like minimal or something like that. Zero distortion, they're claiming. Because again, it's a global shutter. So that's just quite a feat of engineering right there.
Yep. So that's the big deal. A 24.6 megapixel stacked global shutter sensor.
And this is the first time, the world's first full frame global shutter stack sensor, because something like the Red Komodo has a stacked sensor, but that's an APS-C sensor. This is the first time they put it in a full frame sensor.
And so that was the biggest announcement right there.
Do you think, by the way, before we get more into the specs, that they did this announcement early to beat the R1?
No.
In case the R1 had a global shutter as well, because Sony's very big on the world's first in all of their presentations, because this is not coming out for 6 months. Typically in the past, it's always been, a month later, maybe 6 weeks later, you can actually have this in your hands. You can pre-order day of and then get it about 6 weeks later. This time around, you can't even open the RAW file in their Sony Imaging Edge software. We've always been able to open the RAW file at the event in their proprietary software, but just not something like Lightroom or Photoshop or a third party. This time around, they didn't even have that ready. And it was on firmware 0.8. It was still beta firmware as well, which is kind of odd.
I'm not sure if they wanted to beat Canon or what, but this is all prepping for the Olympics in the summer.
Of course.
Right? They're all prepping for that.
But that's why I thought spring would have been the time of this release, because they then would have had the camera out a month, 6 weeks later.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the cameras end up coming out around the same time, an R1, but they haven't given us any information. I think we might in the next couple of, before the end of the year, maybe
some kind of
get a development announcement.
Yeah.
Or that's going to come end of January, early February. Maybe that's what's going to happen.
I think Canon is definitely going to fire back with a DA for sure. They're not going to let this one just wait. They're not going to wait until spring to finally lay it on us. It's going to have to be beforehand.
So on top of the stack sensor, the other major feature that I've always wanted in a camera, and people are like, but Nikon has it, is pre-shooting.
Yes.
But pre-shooting on this camera allows you to pre-shoot up to a full second and all the way down to like 0.001 of pre-shooting.
A tenth of a second.
But what is interesting about this one is you can do it in RAW, and you can do uncompressed RAW. You can do compressed RAW, compressed lossless RAW, and you can do compressed lossless RAW at 120 frames per second with full autofocus and full metering. So you are not losing anything, and you are just blasting through images when you shoot at 120 frames per second. But the pre-shooting is the most incredible thing that I've always wanted. The way that it works is when you hold your finger halfway down on the shutter button, the buffer is buffering those images. In my case, they're going to be RAW images for a predetermined amount of time. If you say a second, it's going to pre-record for a second when you press the shutter. So when you press that shutter, it's taking that second of buffering and it's basically saying, okay, save those to the card. And then it's also taking all the new pictures that you take and saving those to the card. So that if you see something happen and you didn't shoot it right away, well, when you react, you're going to have it because it was pre-buffering.
So they were claiming that you get about 1.6 seconds or 192 frames to be exact when you're shooting 120 frames per second in terms of the buffer. Now, if you're doing
lossless compressed RAW.
Correct. If you're doing pre-capture shooting on top of that, does that take away a second from that buffer? So
yes.
You only have nearly half a second of actually
0.6.
shooting after?
That's correct.
Okay, interesting.
I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
I really wish they went with CF Express B cards, because I think they would have gotten to squeeze double that time if they had faster cards.
I agree. They've made changes to the body to make it more ergonomic. They put new buttons, a C5 button in a very good place to do boost mode. Speed boost when you want to get that 120 frames a second, but you normally are shooting at 30. You can hit the speed boost button, hold that in while shooting pictures, and get that quick burst of 120. But going with the CF Express A and the SD cards, which it's the same slot, they can take both, I still think is a mistake.
They did say you could still do the 120 frames per second mode if you're doing like compressed RAW, if you're using an SD card. So the SD card, I guess, still makes sense if you're using this camera. It's not like
it's just not going to clear the buffer.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
You don't get to shoot as quick. And we've seen it with Nikon, with the Z9, right? It's got CF Express B cards, and that's a 45 megapixel camera. It clears the buffer without even sneezing.
Yeah.
When you're shooting RAW. They're all compressed RAW, but it's still without sneezing.
Yeah, and if you're shooting their 120 frames per second mode, obviously it's all JPEG, so it's going to clear that buffer much faster.
Yeah, and the R3 has a CF Express B card as well as SD, and you don't outrun either of those, again, and that's 24 megapixels. Now, you're not shooting at the same speed, but I really think that you would have gotten better buffer clearing capability with the CF Express B. I think CF Express A is more expensive. It's a smaller, not just smaller form factor, but less data storage, and it's more expensive.
And so slower is the biggest thing.
Did I say more expensive twice?
Yeah.
I meant to say slower.
Yeah.
So it's slower, and it's just it's really, I think, the wrong choice there. But regardless, the 120 frames per second shooting speed is the main feature. The pre-shooting, the global shutter, and then being that it's a global shutter, that there is no sync speed when it comes to flash.
Correct.
You can sync at any speed you want, which is going to come in handy for flash shooters or sports photographers who can't go above 1/250th of a second before, which was the sync speed for Sony. See, that's the other thing. You have a 24 megapixel camera with all these great specs, and you hit us at $6,000, which is the same price that more expensive than an R3. And if the A1 is on sale, it's the same price as a 50 megapixel A1 that shoots 30 frames a second. The only thing that the A1 is missing, Steven, that if they could add it, regardless of a global shutter, is pre-shooting.
The A1's 6,500
right now.
Yeah.
But when it was on sale.
Wow, the R3's down to $5,000 on
Really?
sale. Yeah, right now it's $1,000 off.
Holy Jesus.
And then the Z9 is currently same price,
in a dumpster
$5,500.
file. Dumpster fire.
Oh.
$6,000 is a lot. And the reason I say that is because the A9 II, even though it's 4 years old at this point, is a $4,500 body. So I want to say, you want to add $500, you want to add $750, but you're adding $1,500.
It should have been about $5,000.
But we don't know. We can't say should have, because we don't know the cost of the technology, the development, and everything, and the prices will come down in the future.
Mainly because you have the A1 sitting at $6,500. Now you have almost two. By the way, they are saying this is not the flagship, that the A1 is still currently the flagship. This goes back to what I was saying about renaming it. It should have been like an A3, an A2, something in between.
It has the global shutter. You had a chance to make it a new lineup.
That, and it's $6,000 now. It's not that $4,500 A9 price point. It's a brand new, totally different camera at this point. Why not rename it?
Yeah, and I know some people were questioning why would they put better technology in this camera than their A1, but that's the cycle that all these manufacturers go with. There's certain things in an R8 and an R6 Mark II that the R3 doesn't have.
Sure.
There's things, the A1 doesn't have a dedicated AI processor, whereas this camera, the A9 III, has a dedicated AI processor for the autofocus. All things that will happen to the A1 Mark II when they come out with it.
I mean, we've seen other features from like the ZV-E1 coming to this camera, like the dynamic active mode stabilization, the auto framing, all that AI kind of stuff, the processor from the A7R5, the AI processor, the awesome screen from the A7R5, all of that stuff now is in this body.
Wait, Steven. When you say awesome screen, you're just referring to the flip out rotation option of that screen, not the actual quality that's garbage of that screen.
Yes, I should say the tiltability and the very angle ability of that screen. The fact that it's the best of both worlds for videographers and photographers. That's what I love about that screen. Not so much the quality, although they still claim it's 2.1 million dots, a 3.2 inch screen.
Still looks like shit.
With P3 color, which I don't know. They're like, yeah, it's the same color you're going to see on a normal monitor with P3. I don't see that at all. I still think it looks very flat and washed out on the back of the screen.
100%. But we got it in our hands to go photograph. Sony does a good job putting up sample things to shoot. Now, it was indoors. They had a beach volleyball indoor scene. They had a basketball indoor scene. They had ping pong, and then they had a boxing ring set up for stuff. They also flew a shit ton of lights to blast the scenes with a ton of lighting. A ton.
They had the Aperture 600Ds, the Aperture 1200Ds, all at full power, because I was curious, and I went towards the back of the C-stand, and I wanted to see what power they were at. They were all at 100% full power, which is a lot of light. And they would have like 4 of these guys, along with skylights surrounding the scene, so it was bright. People were probably shooting like base ISO, and we'll talk about that in a minute too, when it comes to video.
I was at 1,000. I was at the
video
other thing we didn't...
about.
Oh, for video. The one thing I didn't mention is the other thing is it shoots at 1/80,000th of a second.
Yes.
Max shutter speed. Then when Steven was setting up the camera, because I hand the camera to Steven to set it up because he knows where everything, well, he knows where I want it for the most part. And he's like, the ISO for stills only goes down to 250. Now, I saw some people, they're like, but it shows 125, it shows 100.
But that's the expandable ISO, not the native ISO, because the expandable is always the line at the bottom or whatever on Sony cameras. And then when you see the normal native, that's when it has no line.
And what that means is the engineers have deemed that 250 is They agree, like, yep, this is great. And that anything else, whether it's high ISO or lower with the line under it, is deemed it can work, but they don't fully recommend it quality-wise.
And now, since the base ISO for photography is 250, the base ISO for video, log video, is 2000, where it used to be 800. So you're going a stop and a third from 100 to 250 for photos, and then from 800 to 2000 for video. Now it's log video.
That's log.
So, yeah.
The reason we bring this stuff up is these are things that Sony didn't
mention. They never do.
Right?
They never mention the bad things.
Well, they don't talk about dynamic range. They didn't talk about, oh, this sensor achieves 16 stops of dynamic range.
Every Sony video, they always mention 15 stops of dynamic range with S-Log3 or whatever it may be. This is I think this is the first time they never mentioned anything about dynamic range or even the ISO on screen.
So there's certain things that we won't say that they hide, but they don't show you, and then you have to discover. And so when we put out the initial video, that was like the highest we were at. We're like a super high right then on all these new features. And then when you start digging, and it doesn't change what I said in my initial preview.
Of course.
The things I was excited about and talking about a gut punch to Canon and a gut punch to Nikon, the gut punch is these features that they don't offer. Right? And how are they going to counter it and show up later? I don't know that Nikon is going to be able to get there anytime soon. I think Canon, they can pull a rabbit out of a hat with a bat and a 6.4 Impala. They could do that.
Because Canon is making their own sensors, where Nikon is waiting on Sony basically to make their sensors and then take one off them.
Because they don't allow certain technologies to go to third parties until that technology is a year or two old. So they can go and say, here's the menu, Nikon, here's what we can get you. We can do a stack sensor at 45 megapixels, and then you can do the autofocus on the sensor. Like, here's the things you can pick. Here's the circuitry, and then they produce it for them.
Do you want cheese or no cheese?
Basically. Would you like fries with that? That was supposed to be Good Burger.
This is the beginning of a new era in photography. Like we titled the video, this changes everything. It really does.
But what does this actually change, Jared?
And just like the original A9, I mean, look where we're at now, and that's what started it. And you look back on the A9, and you're like, it doesn't have any of the features that today's cameras have, obviously, but this is the new standard for high-end sports cameras.
Just the thing we don't know, but the A1 is still a great standard for sports.
And that's the thing. I don't think people with the A1 are downgrading, if you want to call it, because, technically it's a flagship, to this camera. I think this is more for people getting into the Sony line and wanting to shoot sports, or someone with an A9-1 or an A9-2 that couldn't afford an A1, even though now this is still $6,000.
Basically the same price.
I don't think this is for A1 users, though. I think this is for other people.
Like I said, the thing that I would want in A1 with an upgrade is pre-shooting. And I don't care if it's a stack sensor that's not a global shutter. There is no bowing in an A1. You don't have that. But what an A1 II needs... Yeah, you do have some of that coming off the LED boards. And I personally made the decision to go from an A1 to an R3, from 50 megapixels to 24. And that was a hard decision to give up on those extra megapixels. But the cleanliness and the ISO capability and the lens choices that you have on the Canon front is what brought me over to that system, as I've said time and time again.
Have your 10 to 20 f4, your 28 to 70 f2, and the 100 to 300 2.8, all three lenses that neither Nikon or Sony have, and that's what's basically holding you back on... I shouldn't say holding you back. That's what's keeping you at Canon.
Well, 85-1.2. They don't have that.
Well,
Sony
Nikon has an
85
1.2, but yes, Sony
Nikon
doesn't have that
does.
either. But they have the 135 1.8, so...
They do, but still, an 85-1.2. They're 50. Sony's 50-1.2 is fantastic. That's what I shot the basketball photos with that I posted.
All of their prime GMs are great, and they're so small and fast and silent. They're one of the only lenses that, in my opinion, are actually completely silent when focusing.
Yeah. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't know a lot about image quality just yet because we can't open RAW files. The JPEGs at 1,000 looked fine to me. I mean, I crush the blacks anyway when I do my edits.
That was the thing. A lot of people were saying, the dynamic range. Typically, you take a hit on dynamic range when you're doing a global shutter. But for someone like you, I don't think it matters at all because you're crushing it anyway to probably 8 to 10 stops at the end of the day when you're throwing a ton of contrast and again crushing the blacks and blowing out those highlights.
And what I think people don't understand about dynamic range is that when a camera is like, we have 17 stops of dynamic range. If you look at the image that comes in off of a video or that would be a flat gray image. That's
how
what they're
you're
talking
getting
about.
Exactly. And that's why like S-Log3, okay, you're getting 15 stops, but that's if I barely use any contrast and do any editing terrible. And barely throw a LUT on. So
right. And so you still need to process and edit it. There's a lot of unknowns. How is the high ISO capability versus an R3 or versus an A1. We don't know this stuff because we don't have final firmware and we don't have a unit with us. Everything had to stay with them because it's actually pretty amazing that they allowed us to take pictures with the cameras and take them without any restrictions at all.
I am surprised.
They didn't say you must say this. Now we're telling you that it was pre-production because it is pre-production.
But I don't think they really said it until we asked.
Well, you checked and it said 0.8. They didn't tell us anything, which is fine. If they don't say something, then
we
it
have
means
free
you can
reign
do
to
whatever you want.
Yeah, I do want to hit on some of the things they didn't talk about that I found in the camera after the fact, going through the menu. For example, there is no mechanical shutter at all. This is strictly a global shutter, and that is it, which is totally fine. That's what's expected. I think that's where the industry is moving forward with, no more physical mechanical shutters. Now they actually have a curtain that does come down to protect the sensor. It's not a sensor shield, they're calling it. It's just a regular mechanical curtain that comes down. It is off by default, which I find very odd. I think that should always be on. Just like the Z9, that sensor shield should be on by default, and I'm pretty sure that was off by default as well. Now, I didn't check if it's instant on or off, when it comes to that protected curtain. I hope it is, but our camera, again, was off by default.
When I actually didn't check the feeling of turning the camera off, turning the camera on to see how long it took to start up.
They also have this new noise reduction composite RAW shooting that they didn't touch on at all during the presentation. That's brand new in this camera. It's composite RAW shooting that captures multiple images, up to 32 photos in a row, which then can be merged in their Imaging Edge software to give you full resolution, quote unquote, noise-free shooting. Now, since this camera shoots so damn fast at the 120 frames per second rate.
That's a quarter of a second.
And has an insane shutter speed. You can do this with moving subjects. You don't need static subjects. If you're shooting that fast, you should still be able to do composite RAW shooting. We couldn't use this feature.
I don't think that software exists yet.
Also, the EVF, 120 frames per second refresh rate in the EVF, you now get that even in the highest quality setting to get the 9.44 million dots. There's no more need to sacrifice quality over the refresh rate, which is very nice. Now, if you do 240 frames per second, you're still getting dumbed down quality. You're not going to get that 9.44 million dots. But before in the past, it was like 60. So when you would set the high frame rate, you would just get a poor looking EVF image. You also can't go above 1/16,000th of a second if you're doing continuous shooting or using a wider aperture lens than f1.8, so that 1/80,000th of a second shutter speed is a single shot. The grip is the same vertical and horizontal. It even includes that C5 custom button, which is really nice. I think they actually really made this body nice for once.
Still doesn't feel as good as other cameras.
I agree. The
hand,
R3 still is the best feeling camera in my opinion, but the rubber grip too, it's not that really plasticky feeling grip anymore.
Still feels
it actually
slippery,
feels better. It's a different type of material. I can't explain it. You just have to hold it to understand. And the grip is really nice because they finally mimicked it. So it's exactly the same shooting horizontal versus vertical. The batteries drain at the same time now in the grip now instead of one at a time like it used to be. They say this gets you 15% more battery life in the end, even though you can't really hot swap batteries anymore, which is kind of annoying. Like you can't fully drain one and then just swap it out real quick. Now you're going to have two batteries at 50%. You're going to have to change them both at the same time once the batteries drain. But again, they say you get 15% more battery life. You get new focus points, the extra small and the extra large. You can also fully customize that box how you want it. Same thing with pretty much the Nikon with pinpoint focusing, and Canon has also a very small focus point that you can also customize however you want. My biggest question in the end though, will third-party lenses not be able to be utilized like in this camera at all because they're only limited to 15 frames per second? They can't even do 30, 60, or 120.
Yeah, I think they'll still be limited.
Will there be some sort of firmware update that will unlock that? I don't know.
Not if you couldn't even do 30 frames a second. I don't think they're unlocking it.
Yeah.
And see, that's like, you don't hear people yelling at like, how Canon gets yelled at for not having third-party glass. But when they limit your third-party glass on the Sony, you're not hearing people yelling too much about that right now.
Yeah, you're not using third-party lenses on this camera like at all.
I mean, you can, like if you're doing
but why buy this camera
stuff,
then if you're under 30 frames per second?
I mean, we're not going to be shooting everything at 120 frames a second.
No, but I think a lot of people are buying this camera for wildlife, for sports, shooting at least 30 frames per second is my guess. And the only thing too, you can't dial in a custom frame rate. Like Nikon, I feel like you can dial in any number you want, where here it's limited to 30, 60, or 120. There's no 90 option. It's just 30, 60, 120.
And I would like to dial in 40.
But
personally,
I do absolutely love that speed boost option because you can be at 30 or 20 and just and then hit the speed boost button. All of a sudden, it's firing away like a machine gun, and you could just hit it for a split second, get that moment you needed, and then done. You're still always in 20, 30 frames per second, whatever you want.
There's a lot in the camera. Which are you done with specs?
Yeah, and then the last thing, it actually goes to 1/48th of a second when you're in video mode, which is really nice. You're getting that true shutter angle if you're shooting at 24p. It's not true 24p, but you know what I mean. 24 frames per second, 23.98.
Yeah, I mean it was a exciting announcement, and then it makes you question a bunch of things, right? I know there's a lot of people that are questioning, do you dump your A1 for this? And I still say no.
I agree.
You're not missing out on that much. There are, of course, this always happens with technology. And if you're a Canon shooter, you're not jumping ship to Sony because they came out with something that might be better on their end than an R3. The reason that's not happening is because if you owned an R3, you probably own a bunch of RF Canon glass already, and you're not just going to jump ship because there's certain lenses you can't get over there. And there's nothing wrong with these R3s or cameras that came before this. Just like you could pick up a camera from 15 years ago and 20 years ago, and if you know what you're doing, you should be able to get quality results. And that still holds true today. Buying a Sony A9 III and shooting at 120 frames per second when you have no clue what you're doing is still not going to lead to quality images. It still comes down to understanding the fundamentals and basics of photography, shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and composition. If you suck, it doesn't matter what camera you use because you still suck. Remember that.
Most sports photographers don't want to switch from an A1 to this A9 III, mainly because of the resolution, obviously. You're going from 50 to 24, which is a big downgrade when it comes to resolution. Now, the question is, will the R1 have a global shutter, but be able to achieve that 47, 50 megapixel range that the Z9 has, that the A1 has? Because that will then be a big, big step forward.
I've been thinking about this, and I know that if Canon announces a stack sensor that's not global, will people shit on them?
For sure.
But I don't think, we don't, again, know what the downsides of the global shutter are in this A9 III yet.
I mean,
fully.
Generally, again, it's dynamic range loss for the most part. It's the quality loss at high ISO too. That's typically what you get hit on with a global shutter. But I talked to one of the Sony engineers there, and they specifically said that Sony told them there's no loss in quality compared to an A9 II. I don't know if that's true. That could just be him, throwing smoke out, but who knows?
But I want 4 years better technology than the A9 II at this point. I really am happy with the quality that comes off the R3. I'm happy with those files. And I don't think that if an R1 comes out and has a stacked sensor that can still shoot that will shoot at 120 frames per second, if I had to guess, which will have pre-shooting, if I had to guess, that you will notice much of a difference between the two, but you might still get some of that flickering, which we should mention that if you're shooting in a gymnasium with the A9 III, and you know how you would get the flickering lights and it would be like a band throughout the image, well, now in this case, you're going to have a clean image because it's not going to shoot when that flickering is happening. You'll get a full clean image.
If you have anti-flicker on, you will have a full image nonstop. But if you don't have anti-flicker on, you might still hit the down part of that flick, and you might have one dark image, one bright image. There's just no banding that's happening.
So you won't have a missed shot that has half the frame.
You'll just have one dark exposure, one normal exposure, dark, normal.
Which is fine.
Unless you put anti-flicker on, which is awesome because then you'll just have a constant, continuous, normal exposure.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what Canon decides to come out with. What's the price point going to be? Is it 24 megapixels? Is it 45? Is it more? What's it going to do? I care more about high ISO cleanliness than, say, the global shutter aspect, because the stack sensors have gotten so fast.
They're good enough
that you don't have the imperfections.
Stack sensors will be able to stop almost every fast-moving object. Now, when it comes to a bullet, a balloon popping, like insanely fast-moving objects, that's when they can't compensate for that speed. But now with a global shutter, you will be able to get, as long as you're at the right shutter speed, obviously, a frozen image of a bullet of whatever it may be, especially at 1/80,000th of a second.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. So,
and that's the amazing part too, is at 1/80,000th of a second, you could then still be, firing flash at it or a strobe or whatever it may be, and still having that light, where before you would just have to blast continuous light at it.
Yeah, so the R3 goes to 1/32,000th of a second.
Yeah, but it doesn't sync with a flash like that.
No, it doesn't. But this is where the dilemma comes into play with me going to Africa. Being all prepared to take a 100 to 300, a 28 to 70, 10 to 20, 400 to 8, 200 to 800 if that comes in the mail in time. And then they come out with this, and am I going to take this body? Now, if I have this body, I will absolutely take it and put it in the bag because it's not going to take up a lot of space. I also know that 2 or 3 of the other shooters on the trip will be shooting Sony, so there will be a bunch of Sony glass. We should be able to get 300 2.8s to take, so maybe I'll just rely on someone else borrowing lenses for a certain point that hopefully doesn't take away from them shooting and run some review stuff in Africa, in the real world, using an A9 III. I still want to take my R3 because I want to use the 200 to 800 if it gets here in time. That would be a monkey wrench if it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I also am going to Alan's camera after this episode to take my gear with me to find out which backpack is the right one, because I have to figure out what gear I can take and what bags are going to work for me.
Man, so much gear.
Well, you don't really want to have rolling bags.
Yeah, I know.
But you don't want rolling bags because we're going to be in vehicles. So it really doesn't matter how much weight you have.
Well, you might be limited in space if you have how many other photographers with you.
Well, that's why it's been planned to have 5 people. It's like 1 or 2 less than normal for a trip like this. So we'll have our bags, but I really will just have, I'm going to need 2 bags.
How big is this vehicle you're going to be in?
They're pretty big safari vehicles.
But will your gear be like on top?
No, I think
Inside?
I don't know. In the back, in the boot, by our feet. I really don't know. I really don't know. I'll figure it all out when I get there. I'm pretty good at figuring it out when I get there. I still am planning on taking the gear that I was planning on taking. It would honestly be great if I didn't have to take a 400 2.8, but I don't. This is the rub doing what I do. This is a trip for me to go to Africa and take pictures. On the flip side, it's a trip for me to go to Africa and make reviews.
It's a trip to write off.
Right. It's a write-off because I'm doing work, you know, which I am actually
you really
doing
are,
work.
though, yeah.
So I don't want to sacrifice having just a 200 to 800 quality-wise. That's a whatever that aperture was, 6.3 to f9.
Yeah.
Versus a 400, which you know you're going to get what you want. I mean, I love the versatility of a 2 to 8, and I'm sure it's going to be. You won't notice like non-sharpness. I don't know. We haven't used it yet. But this is the shit that has to go through my brain because where the hell's a 200 to 800 going to fit into my bag?
Do you have a schedule or itinerary of some sort yet? Like when you're going to be shooting, what time of day, all of that?
Yeah, all different times of day. We have everything from night shoots to day shoots to morning shoots to wherever at different conservancies, different parks. We'll be all over the place.
Okay.
We'll be flying on little planes, but we each have an extra seat in the plane for our gear.
Good.
For weight purposes. But, you know, if I have a think tank backpack, that means I'm not going to have a think tank roller. So how am I going to carry my second bag?
Yeah.
And then where am I putting clothes? Do I have a checked bag this time? And if so, do you use a duffel bag for that? Because that's what the other people were talking about, that when you fly the smaller planes, they want duffel bags instead of hard side cases because they can squeeze more into the smaller plane.
Yeah. Lots of stuff you'll be bringing for sure.
Anyway, that's what I got, Steven. You got anything else you want to go over today?
No, that's it. Just a crazy week for us. A start of a new era for mirrorless technology. I'm really, really curious how the other manufacturers are going to respond now.
We'll see what happens. Just don't over worry yourself about gear.
No.
Just because this technology is in this camera and you don't have that technology and you can't afford it, it's not going to make you better.
It doesn't render your R3, your Z9, your A1 useless. They're still amazing cameras. This is just a new leap forward in technology, but
Steven,
you don't need it. You do not need it.
And it doesn't render your A7 III, your A7C. It doesn't render anything useless.
You might be able to achieve
different
shots that you could have never achieved before with this crazy frame rate and global shutter. Again, mainly for birders and sports photographers. If you shoot landscapes, you're not looking at this camera at all. If you shoot portraits, you're not looking at this camera at all. Well, maybe for flash. Weddings,
but again,
I can see.
If you don't understand the basics and fundamentals of photography, none of it matters. If you can't get your composition right, I don't care if you're shooting at 120 frames per second or 1 frame a second. You don't need it. And I always challenge people, just turn your camera on to the very basics sometimes. Put yourself on, you could do continuous focus, but turn it out of spray and pray mode. Turn it into one shot.
Challenge
and
yourself.
Go out and shoot 36 shots with a 35 millimeter lens or a 50 millimeter lens, so you don't have a zoom. And if you do have a zoom that's 24 to 70, lock it off at 50.
Take off the EVF simulation, black out your screen, have fun with it.
Challenge yourself. So when we talk about new gear, it's not telling you that your gear sucks and you need to sell it. I always look at it from the standpoint, first and foremost, how's it help me? Because I'm selfish and I want to know how I'm going to be able to utilize it to get the images that I want to get. But that doesn't mean I also have to put on the hat of someone who couldn't afford the stuff right now, which is like me when I first started, and I would watch generation after generation of camera come out that I couldn't afford, and I'm still sitting there with the D2H when something else was coming out. Or if you had just something else, you're like, I don't know I can't upgrade that. I only have 2 lenses and 1 body. I'll get there one day.
Before we wrap up, I did want to hit on, by the way, what we recommend for future press events like this. Sony, Canon, Nikon, whoever's listening, please have some kind of crazy fast internet speed or way to plug directly in, like an Ethernet port with a USB-C dongle of some sort. We had some serious issues trying to get that video out into the world right from the press event. I think our upload speed was like 7 or 8 up, if that. It said an hour to upload, even with a 500 megabyte 1080p file. We eventually had to plug in behind the scenes with the production people that were doing the live stream. They had Ethernet cables plugged in that were like 90 up, and that took about 10 minutes. But that was a little rough. We really got spoiled with having the camera gear a month ahead of announcement.
Yeah. Well, that was my thing. It was like, you were having trouble uploading. We tried to use my phone. We tried to use the Wi-Fi at the Sony thing.
Tried everything.
And I'm like, you know what? They were live streaming this event. They have to have a way to do this.
I initially exported at 4K, and I'm like, you know what? Just in case, let's do 1080p as well. The 4K file was like 3 gigs. I'm like, all right, that's not much at all, but we're also used to gigabit speeds here. And yeah, it said over an hour. Tried 1080p, still said over an hour. So that is the one thing I think they need to work on next time. But besides that, the event was great.
That's it. We're going to be done. That was a lot of stuff to talk about, guys. I guess we'll still be here next week. Thanksgiving comes up. Who knows what we're going to do for episodes during holiday weeks.
The year is winding down. It's going to be a little rough trying to throw in some of these podcasts, especially with you going to Africa. We shall see.
Oh, that's right. I have to pack the microphone.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way I could take a smaller microphone. I could even use my AirPods. We've done it before, and they're fine.
It doesn't take up that much room again.
Steven, I'm going to Africa, and I'm the one who has to carry the damn thing. It's not a camel. I don't have a camel.
Yeah, but
I have an elephant.
It's not that much room.
Anyway, guys, episode 76 of RAWtalk. Hope you enjoyed it. As Steven always says, please give us 5 stars, and if you want to give us less, go fuck yourself.
Exactly.
That's Steven's quote.
That's what I say.
Steven always says that. Those are words right out of Steven's mouth. In fact, that was Steven who said it. It wasn't me.
That was not me. What?
You can text us 313-710-9729. I like to wish you guys a happy birthday on there if it's when I'm by my computer and it is your birthday and you do get a text. It was written by me on that day. None of that's pre-recorded or predetermined. I actually write that every damn day. And Steven and I do try to reply back to your messages depending on what the message actually is.
Yes.
So thank you guys very much for listening. Jared Polin for NosFotow.com. See ya.
Bye.